My name is Yvette Tete, and I am an agribusiness entrepreneur, a creative, and an athlete. Whenever I'm talking to my friends, I'm like, oh, my swim thing. But actually, this is so much more than the swim thing. The Agbetsi Living Water Swim expedition is essentially an environmental campaign that is looking at the water quality of all the different water bodies around Ghana. And it's building on initial research that started actually in Accra. And that initial research was looking at the impact of textile pollution on the quality of water. And what we're trying to do with the swim is, look at the quality of water in other parts of Ghana and really being able to trace quality of water from the north to the south. And of course, to just build attention and awareness around the Volta River, around the quality of water, around our relationship to water. And I think also just to create an exciting experience around this super important water body in Ghana. I'm aiming to swim between 15 to 20 kilometers a day. So, a couple of hours of swimming, eating, sleeping, it's not that hard. Yeah. I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned, even already before the actual swim and expedition has begun, is just the importance of consistency and patience and just a slow, sustained exploration. Even I'm overwhelmed if I think about 450 kilometers. And I also have this vision of when I was actually swimming in the Volta Lake and there was all these waves coming against me, and you look left, you look right, and you're like, wow, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And obviously that's really scary. If you are breaking it down into small, manageable parts, which is the reality of how it works, how almost anything works, it just doesn't feel impossible. Each individual person strives to have a greater experience of life, right? Like, that sounds like such a broad statement, but I truly think that the point of us being alive, other than to experience love and look after our families, is to experience the fullness of life, to feel excited, to enjoy pleasurable things. And for better and worse, a lot for worse, we've started to associate development, moving forward in life, and even pleasure with so much consumerism. Sometimes it's easy to just ignore that problem or just not even to be aware of it. But partly because of my work with the Ore Foundation, I've gone to the communities in Accra, like Old Fadama, that are inundated with textile pollution. The whole point of the research we're doing is to show how this problem of overconsumption, for example, of textiles, of clothing, poisons the water bodies. And to be honest, at that point, we're all impacted. I mean, I don't know how many of us are even drinking the water out of the tap, but, if we're not, because we don't trust it. And so there's a way in which these problems seem invisible or are invisible if you're not paying attention, seem isolated to certain communities, but then you realize over time that there's no such thing as an isolated problem. It will impact all of us at some point. And it may not be that, okay, we have a literal mountain of old t-shirts in front of our house, but it might be that, okay, I want to drink water out of the tap and I can't. Or it might be that, oh, I want to go and enjoy a beautiful holiday weekend along the Volta River. I go somewhere and there is textile waste on the floor. And then there's also thinking about all the people who are involved in these industries in conditions that are not necessarily sustainable. So it's not even necessarily a problem just of environmental waste, but of, the human condition and what people who are involved in the textile industry or the recycling of textiles, what they're having to go through to feed what feels like this unstoppable addiction for consumerism, for consumption of clothing. It's easy for us to look at the narrative of climate change being a reality that is happening, has been happening, and get overwhelmed and feel that there's nothing we can do or the problem is too big. which is somewhat true. The problem is massive. But at the same time, kind of in the same way that, like, I'm thinking about the swim, or any of us are thinking about this expedition, it at first feels like this impossible, overwhelming reality. But when we look closely and break it down into the smaller realities, the smaller component parts, we realize there's so much to learn as we go. I've been running a business now for the last 5 to 6 years. And everything about running a business is so frenetic and manic. But at the same time, there's something that feels very out of your control about it. And I think there's something very beautiful and encouraging about going on an expedition that is so overwhelming, is so large, is so daunting, but reminds you that anything is possible as long as you do it in a sustained, calm way. And so for me, as a kind of complement, an antidote to the wildness of my life, it's really nice to just have a project that gives me purpose, that I can give time to every day, and that feels so personal, but also feels beyond me. So, I'm not immune from spending hours on social media, but it's been really great to have, an hour and a half, 2 hours of swimming where I don't even have the possibility of being on my phone or even talking to anyone else. Because there are times where it's like, I don't even want to talk to my friends. I just want to be alone, And so there's something very magical, very dreamy about being in this state of flow and working towards a goal, even though in reality, you're actually just going up and down in a swimming pool 50 times. It's really nice to have something that helps you to feel more attuned to yourself, a little bit more in control in a world that feels very beyond one's control. So the name of our research vessel is The Woman Who Does Not Fear, which is a quote from an Audre Lorde essay, funnily enough, on uses of the erotic. And it's like, okay, how does that relate? But I think what's so amazing to me about that essay that Audre Lorde wrote and about that particular quote was that it just asks us to not have fear, to not be afraid of what's possible. I definitely have fears. I mean, it's scary to be like, I'm going to swim 450 kilometers. It's scary. But I've always been struck by how much is lost by giving into fear, especially when it seems that something is not literally impossible. I don't know. I'm a very impulsive, very curious person. So for me, it's worth it to move through fear in order to have a new experience, especially if it's going to be exciting. And I mean, oh my gosh, like traveling down the Volta River, you don't even have to travel. If you go to just Akosombo, it's just so beautiful. It is so worth it. It is so magical to just step away from land, step away from security, and have a new experience. It's just dreamy. With this research vessel, we're saying you don't have to fear. You don't have to be consumed by fear. You can move forward.